Pastor John Gray had just revealed something about Toure Roberts that no one saw coming. And from the very first moment, it felt like the kind of story that pulled people in and refused to let go. You won't believe how it all started because everything looked normal from the outside. Toure Roberts stood on huge stages, preached powerful sermons, smiled for cameras, and inspired thousands. His life looked perfect, almost too perfect. But let me tell you, behind that perfect picture, something else was happening. Something quiet, something hidden, and something far more complicated than anyone expected. People had admired him for years, but whispers had begun to grow louder. No one really knew where they came from, but slowly those whispers turned into questions, and those questions turned into rumors. Still, nothing was clear and no one had proof. Everything stayed blurry until John Gray finally spoke. When John Gray decided to share what he had seen, listeners felt the air shift. This was not gossip. This was not a story built on random voices. This was a man who knew to personally, professionally, and honestly. And this is where it gets interesting. Gray didn't come with anger or hate. He came with truth. Truth that carried weight. He talked about moments behind closed doors. Moments when the version of Toure that people saw on Instagram wasn't the same man leading meetings, making decisions, or handling pressure. But here's the shocking part. John Gray said that many people fell in love with the image of Toure, not the man himself. And when the image and the reality crossed paths, things became messy, confusing, and sometimes painful. He explained that on stage, Toure looked confident, calm, and sure of himself. His life looked blessed, full churches, sold-out events, luxury cars, and smiling crowds. But according to Gray, the real story lived in the struggle no one saw. There were disagreements with other pastors, arguments about leadership decisions, and rising tension that people inside the circle felt more than anyone outside ever imagined. Grace said that some choices Toure made left others shocked, wondering what pushed him to act that way. And the craziest part was that most of these moments never reached the public. They were kept quiet, covered up, and locked away as if nothing had ever happened. John Gray shared how he watched to try to balance the pressure of being a public figure with the weight of personal challenges. There were nights when he felt torn between looking strong for his followers and dealing with his own doubts inside. The expectations were heavy and the fear of disappointing people was even heavier. Gray said that sometimes the smallest decisions turned into the biggest problems because one wrong move could be seen by thousands and destiny took an unexpected turn when one particular disagreement became bigger than anyone predicted. It started small like a simple difference of opinion, but slowly it grew into something deeper. Something that made people question motives, loyalty, and leadership. Through all of this, Gray hinted that the biggest twist hadn't even been revealed yet. The questions were rising. Who was the real Toure Roberts? What was happening behind the public smiles? And how long could someone carry two different versions of themselves? What makes this story different is that it wasn't just about a controversy. It was about a man trying to hold everything together while cracks were quietly forming underneath. And while the world kept admiring him, the people closest to him began to notice the pressure building. The whispers around Toure's name had grown even stronger. And by the time John Gray continued his story, it felt like the calm before a storm that everyone sensed, but no one understood. Gray said that people only saw Toure smiling on stage, but they never saw the moments when he walked off with stress written all over his face. This is where it gets interesting because according to Gray, the real tension didn't come from the public. It came from the people working closest to him. They had seen decisions that didn't match the polished image. They had watched arguments happen in rooms where cameras were never allowed, and they had felt the pressure of keeping everything quiet. So, the outside world stayed impressed. Let me tell you, the inside world was very different. One of the biggest turning points came during a major church conference that looked peaceful from the audience's view. The crowd clapped, pastors smiled, and everything appeared like a perfect picture of unity. But here's the shocking part. John Gray revealed that behind the stage in a room everyone thought was safe and private, things had exploded. Toure and several well-known pastors had fallen into a heated argument that grew louder than anyone expected. The disagreement started with leadership style. How Toure wanted to run things versus how others believed the ministry should move forward. Soon it wasn't just about ideas. It became personal, emotional, and heavy. Some pastors walked out frustrated, others stayed silent, unsure of what to say. And the craziest part, the crowd outside had absolutely no idea what had just happened. Gray explained that this wasn't a one-time moment. These kinds of tensions had been building for a long time. He said that people admired Toure's confidence, but sometimes that confidence turned into something stronger, something that made others feel ignored or unheard. Staff members often found themselves stuck between following Toure's direction and following their own sense of what was right. And every time someone disagreed with him, it felt like the pressure in the room rose a little higher. Their destiny took an unexpected turn when one of Toure's decisions at this conference caused a huge divide. Some leaders supported him, believing he was bold. Others doubted him, thinking he was moving too fast, too strong, or too alone. John Gray remembered the tension so clearly that even while telling the story, it sounded like he was still standing in that room. He said it was one of those moments where silence had more power than words. People were afraid that if these conflicts became public, it would damage more than just reputations. It could break trust within the entire gospel community. What makes the story different is that no one on the outside ever suspected anything. They only saw smiling pictures, friendly posts, and carefully chosen words online. But the reality behind those posts was far more complicated. As Gray continued, he hinted that the deeper problem wasn't just conflict. It was the pressure Tay felt to keep his image clean. He tried to stay calm publicly, even when things were falling apart privately. He didn't want followers to question his leadership. So, he hid the stress, the fear, and the moments of doubt. Gray said that T was trying to carry everything at once. His ministry, his reputation, his relationships, and every piece demanded something different from him. And the more he tried to handle alone, the more the pressure grew. Still, Gray said the biggest twist hadn't come yet. The decision Tay made afterward, one quiet moment, one private choice, would end up changing everything for him and everyone around him. Now your next section is remaining. John Gray's voice grew heavier when he moved deeper into the story because this was the part where everything slowly began to unravel. He said that after the conference incident, people expected things to calm down, but instead the pressure around Toure grew stronger every day.